What is up, DawgNation? This is DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation insider Connor Riley, who last week told us that he did not want to see Brock Bowers go to the Jets because he thought that they would ruin him. Now, Brock Bowers ultimately ends up getting drafted to the Las Vegas Raiders. Connor, what do you make of that?
I was pumped. I think Brock lands in a great spot. Obviously, the Raiders have to figure out what their quarterback situation is going to be, but there was no one there on the board 13 worth taking. Heck, there was no one on the board worth taking at 8 or 12 either, but that didn't stop the Falcons or the Broncos from doing so. Look, Brock goes to a spot where they already have a tight end in Michael Mayer, who's going to be asked to do a lot of the traditional tight end things. They've got Devontae Adams on the outside. They're going to be forced to find creative ways to get Brock Bowers the ball, which is the kind of place he needed to go to. And I think in getting a power slot like Brock Bowers, it could not have worked out better for the Raiders. And I'm very interested in seeing how he impacts that franchise moving forward.
You see that excitement on Connor's face? That might be the most emotion that we've ever gotten out of him on this show. And speaking of emotions, now Brock Bowers is a guy who tends to not really show his emotions when he makes public appearances. But what I gathered from the emotions was maybe the Raiders wasn't really the team that he would have preferred to go to. What do you think about that?
I think he had said in his comments afterwards that he hadn't had a whole lot of chatter with the Raiders, and so he was perhaps a little bit surprised by that. I think the better reaction, though, from that draft is the picture of his dad, who looks like I've done some things in Vegas before. But ultimately, I think Brock lands in a great spot in Las Vegas. They've got a new coach, a new GM there, so I think they're building towards something. And they've got a lot of good pieces on that offense. He's already got a couple fellow Bulldogs on that team. Chris Smith, All-American on the 2022 team. Zamir White, a similarly beloved and hardworking Bulldog. I think he's going to fit like a glove there in Las Vegas.
Well, DawgNation, if there's one thing that we love to see on this show, it is a happy Connor, because that sets the tone for the rest of the show. And speaking of the show, this is DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
All right, DawgNation, this is our new show, still new, DawgNation at Large, a show where really anything goes, and I think you're going to see that through today's show because we've got a lot in store for you, starting with the transfer portal. Finally closed. What did we learn about UGA from the transfer portal, and why does it matter? And then in light of the draft, Connor and I are going to do some quick hits on our draft reactions because, quite frankly, it was a pretty crazy draft as far as UGA goes and the Falcons go. So we're going to touch on all of that, and then we're going to wrap up with our bold predictions for this upcoming college football season, featuring a lot of special guests from the DawgNation crew, so we will get to that later. But for now, let's start with the transfer portal. I feel like we can all take a deep breath and a step back because it is finally over.
I mean, there was not a whole lot to react to. I don't get what all this big hubbub was about. Georgia only sees two players exit the program via the transfer portal, Andrew Paul and Tyler Williams, guys who weren't going to play a ton or weren't seen as big contributors this year. They go out and add Jaden Rashada there. There's obviously the flirtation there with Christian Miller, but I think as we've seen this spring transfer window, I know there were some people out there that promised fireworks and chaos, but in reality, I think a lot of that work is done in the month of December. And so much of this period is about roster retention, and the fact that you don't see Georgia going out there and trying to flip their roster and make a lot of moves, I think just speaks to how much this really window doesn't need to exist at this point in time. There are a few players finding new homes. Andrew Paul has not yet found one. Tyler Williams going to Minnesota. But for the most part, this Georgia roster is the same as it was on April 14th that it is today on May 2nd.
Yeah, I mean, considering that over 1,200 players in college football entered the spring transfer portal, but the noise around UGA was relatively quiet. I mean, as a writer, I'm sure that's good news for you, and I'm just glad that what is drama around college football, not necessarily around the UGA football program, is finally over, and I'm sure that Kirby Smart feels the same way because it allows the focus to shift back to the team that he has now. Here's what Kirby Smart had to say about the transfer portal after G-Day.
Can I control it? No, I can't. So I don't. If I concern myself with things I can't control, I won't live long. I mean, there's just too much out there. So it's really one of those things where it's like, do you want to be here or do you not? Because they know how we do things by now. They all know. they said that was the easiest practice we've had all spring. So they enjoyed it thoroughly. And if guys want to be somewhere else, I have no control over that.
It truly would not be a complete DawgNation at large show if we didn't get a classic Kirby clip. I think that passive-aggressive Kirby is my favorite version of him in these press conferences, and it comes as no shock that this would be his tone and the way that he would be going about addressing the transfer portal. And I imagine that he's probably more glad that it's over with than us.
Yeah, I think these coaches want to know who's on their roster moving forward. And so this spring window throws obviously another set of variables into that. As some programs have gone about turning over the roster. Miami's been very active in the transfer portal. Auburn has as well. But when you look at these big programs, your Georgias, your Texases, you're really trying to maybe add a piece or two around the edge. That's what they did in Jaden Rashada. He's largely going to be a backup this year if everything goes to plan for Georgia. Jaden Rashada doesn't play a meaningful snap for the Bulldogs this season. So the big thing moving forward for Georgia, now that they've got this roster set, they know what they're doing moving forward. And I think they have a great idea of what this team looks like. And the fact that you didn't see them go out and try and add, say, at wide receiver or defensive line, I think is encouraging for what those positions might ultimately be going into the 2024 season.
I think there's something that you said there that ties back into everything, and it's meaningful snaps. Because between NIL money and meaningful snaps, that's why people are leaving their colleges, because they're not getting those meaningful snaps. But then you have a program like UGA that's got 4 stars, 5 stars all over the field, and they might not get meaningful snaps until their second or even their third year. And their ability to retain the quality of talent that they have, in my mind, speaks volumes about the program and just goes to show that retention is a lot more important than adding pickups in the transfer portal.
Yeah, I think Christian Miller is the perfect example of this. A guy that I'm sure USC and Florida State would have loved to have had. I'm sure when he announced he was entering the transfer portal, they were licking their chops, but ultimately Miller decides to stay at Georgia for a variety of reasons. It's worth pointing out. Again, he put out a video shortly before his transfer intentions were announced that he was focused on NIL, and that doesn't really jive with a lot of what goes on in the Georgia program. But Christian Miller is a guy who, probably not going to start for Georgia this year, but they absolutely expect to play a lot of snaps, and entering his third year in the program, I think is someone who they fully intend on, seeing become the best version of himself. And so being able to retain a guy like that, no matter how they got it done, I think is the most important lesson to be learned from a Georgia perspective coming out of spring practice. Again, so much of it when you recruit as well as Georgia does, it is about retaining players rather than necessarily going out and trying to add as much talent as you possibly can.
So UGA retains Christian Miller, which was breaking news last week. Also breaking news, which was probably jinxed by our very own Brandon Adams, because there has been this trend within DawgNation that when Brandon goes out of town, big things tend to happen. And we saw that with the pickup of Jaden Rashada, who, even though came from Arizona State, was a longtime Florida commit, then an NIL deal fell through. He ended up at Arizona State. Now he comes to Georgia, and Kirby Smart finally gets that fourth quarterback that he's been wanting. I would like to say that out of all of the moves that we've seen made this spring within this window of the transfer portal, I think that Jaden Rashada coming to UGA might rank at the top of the list for best moves made by a university.
I can't quite go that far. There have been some other programs that have made some additions that I think are certainly going to pay more dividends right away. I mean, as much as we can talk about the excitement around Rashada, I still think Gunnar Stockton is the favorite to be both the backup in 2024 and the starter in 2025. And there's a world where this time next year, after it seems clear coming out of the spring game that Gunnar's going to be the starter, maybe Jaden Rashada elects to transfer elsewhere. And that's not a statement at Rashada. That's just the world that we live in now with unlimited transfers and that being a thing. But this is a long-term play for Georgia. He's got 4 years of eligibility left. It gives them stability, not just for this season in theory, but moving forward as well. And this all sort of started back in the 2023 recruiting cycle, which Rashada is a member of, when the Bulldogs went all in on Arch Manning and they don't land him. And so their plan was, okay, in 2024, we're now going to take 2 quarterbacks. Well, the second quarterback they were planning on taking, Dylan Raiola, flips to Nebraska right before the early signing period. And then, they go out and try to land Jaden Maeva, the UNLV quarterback, but he flips his commitment from Georgia to USC. So this has been a long route for Georgia to get to this point, and it's an incredibly interesting player they get it with because of obviously his ties to Florida and the NIL deal that fell through there. But I do think that for Georgia moving forward, it gives them some stability at this quarterback position. And the hope is that that can continue to be the case and sort of revert what had been the norm at this position for the last 3 seasons.
See, I disagree with you. I actually think that you're downplaying this and that this is a way bigger, or this should be a bigger deal than we're making it out to be, because it says so much about the Georgia program. Jaden Rashada has 4 years of eligibility left. He could have gone to a number of programs where he would have been the guaranteed starter, but the fact that he's willing to come to Georgia, who already has an established QB1, that's no question. But then you've got Gunnar Stockton, who is the backup, who Jaden Rashada is going to have to compete with. So he's going to come to UGA and is willing to compete with Gunnar Stockton and Ryan Puglisi for just even a shot at a start next year when he could be the backup to the backup. I think that Jaden Rashada coming to Georgia speaks volumes about the program and what Kirby Smart has built, and I don't think that we're talking about that enough.
I just, again, the alternative, though, is you have these guys who are able to transfer multiple times. And I just think that there's a world where Jaden Rashada never plays a meaningful snap at Georgia. I mean, Brock Vandegrift was a 5-star quarterback, never really played a meaningful snap at Georgia, but he ultimately ends up transferring out, and he's going to be the starter at Kentucky in all likelihood. So perhaps that's maybe what Rashada is looking to follow there. You get some stability. And look, JT Daniels was a guy that transferred out, became the starter at West Virginia, and then ultimately Rice. Jacob Eason was a guy who was starting at Georgia, becomes the backup, transfers out to Washington, and enjoys 2 years starting there. So I think, even if Rashada doesn't see the field, there are values and benefits to be gained from working within this Georgia program, working within this Georgia system, because, the reps he's going to get potentially in practice. You've heard Kirby Smart talk about this with NFL guys, getting to play against NFL caliber talent like a Malachi Starks, the Dalen Everett outside on the cornerback position. There's benefits to that rather than going and playing in, say, a G5 level program every year. So again, it's an interesting ad for Georgia, but I also think there's a world out there where he just doesn't make much of an impact at all. And this time next year, we do potentially see him move on again, because he was a guy who moved around a lot as a high school prospect, was committed to Miami at one point, flips to Florida, signs with Florida, ends up at Arizona State, ends up leaving there after 1 season. And from what Kirby Smart has told us, he doesn't necessarily love recruiting the types of guys that transfer schools all that often. And Rashada does have some of that in his background.
So when all is said and done, UGA loses 2 players in the spring window, picks up Jaden Rashada, retains Christian Miller. At the end of the day, what does it go to say about UGA being able to minimize the amount of players that left during the spring window?
Yeah, I think it speaks to the fact that a lot of the work for this roster was done in that December month. I think, as much as it stunk to not being playing in the college football playoff, I do think that they got a lot of that done and taken care of in that month, and they were able to use the bowl prep as a way to sort of give guys a better idea of where their standing was. They were using those practices as sort of spring practice types. And so to get that sort of information at the end of the 2023 season, I think helped inform where Georgia was going into 2024, and sort of lent to them the idea of, okay, this is where we need to be from a roster standpoint. You get a longer look at some younger players like a Christian Miller, like a Jordan Hall. You get a lot of snaps out of Xavier McLeod in the spring game. In areas you thought might be a need or concern, wide receiver, defensive line, maybe running back even potentially. Because of those extra practices, you do have a better idea of what your roster looks like going into the 2024 season than certainly say like an Alabama or a Michigan who lost their head coach, but even a team like Texas that was in the college football playoff and was having to work and deal with that, rather than being able to go ahead and focus and start turning things ahead towards the 2024 season.
Even though we only touched briefly on UGA in the spring transfer portal window here on DawgNation at Large, Connor did put out an article on DawgNation.com about what we learned about the University of Georgia and its football program through this spring transfer portal. So if you want to read that, you can check it out on DawgNation.com, which is always free. And now we're going to do our draft reactions. When Connor and I talked last week, we went over the steals of the draft. We're going to do an update. We're going to break down a lot of things. So this is Quick Hits with Kaylee and Connor. All right, we've got a stacked lineup. We're gonna try to make these quick, but I doubt that they'll end up being that, because I know that both Connor and I have a lot to say. And we are going to start with Nick Saban being a hater in his debut on ABC. This is what Nick Saban had to say about Amarius Mims. He says the guy's got all the tools. He's got great size. He's got great power. But it makes you wonder, how did the guy only start 8 games? Like, he played in the SEC championship game. He played on the first 15 plays of the game, and then he's out. Takes himself out. I don't know what he injured, what he hurt, whatever. But you've got to be a little bit more consistent in your performance if you're going to be a great player and a starter in the National Football League. Here's my take on this before I let Connor go. I actually think that Nick Saban did a really good job in his television debut, but this felt a little bit personal to me, and I understand where he's coming from. However, what I think back to is when Nick Saban's son, Jermaine Burton, missed the Kentucky game this last year for being sick, when sources who are not related to me, by the way, don't make that assumption. Sources told me that when Alabama arrived to Kentucky, the field conditions were wet and rainy. Jermaine Burton told Nick Saban, I'm not going to play. And you know what? He didn't, and they counted him out as sick. So it feels a little bit hypocritical to me. Connor, you can take it away.
Yeah, I actually take this as a different way. It's, obviously the 8 starts was a common, commonly parroted point when talking about Mims during this draft cycle. It's that middle section there. And to your point, Kaylee, I think Nick Saban did a really good job as a TV analyst. Like, this is his job. It's what he's supposed to do. It's that middle part where he's talking about the SEC championship game and saying that Mims took himself out there. You hear some of the other things that Saban had said about players at Georgia. Kamari Lassiter he said Georgia really, really loved this guy and what he brought to their team. I would not be surprised if Kirby Smart and Nick Saban chatted during the course of this, because again, Kirby Smart, obviously a Nick Saban disciple, arguably the most famous Nick Saban disciple, obviously the most successful as well. And so this may have been something that came up in that game and how Mims handled that there. In that NFL Combine interview, he mentioned that game was not his proudest moment, the Alabama game. And you maybe wonder if that draft status was in the back of his mind there. Look, Amarius missed time last year because of an ankle injury that, to his credit, he fought through and came back from. It took him a while to come back from it, but that's just sort of the reality when you're as big as he is there. I think maybe there was perhaps some communication going on between Kirby Smart and Nick Saban, and Nick was maybe perhaps a little bit more informed on Amarius Mims than maybe just the criticism of, hey, this guy on his best day, I have some real questions about him and what he's going to be as an NFL player. Side
note, Nick Saban admits to tampering on national television. That might have been my favorite Nick Saban take of the whole draft. I hope that we get 1,000 more stories like this from him over the course of his TV appearances.
Yeah, I mean, he's bragging about, trying to commit crimes. I guess now that they can no longer punish him, go for it if they want to punish Alabama for engaging in it. Oh, no, Nick Saban said he tampered. This is what it is.
I loved it. Like I said, I hope we hear more about that from him. All right, moving on. Falcons trending to take UGA players in the 6th round. Out of the last 5 dogs that the Falcons have drafted, 4 out of the 5 have come in the 6th round. Now, we said we thought that the Falcons might take a UGA player, but I didn't think that either of us thought that Zion Logue would be the one that they ended up taking. I didn't even know if Zion Logue was going to get drafted in the first place, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I did not have a pre-write ready for Mr. Logue. I was waiting to write it, and then naturally he gets drafted there, which I'm sure there's a valuable lesson. And look, for Zion, I love this for him. This is a guy that was a true professional in his time at Georgia. This was the guy that stepped in the middle of that defense after Jordan Davis was drafted in the 1st round, did everything that was asked of him, played a real solid role, and it wouldn't surprise me if he does that for the Falcons there. But as Kaylee mentions, look, Atlanta for a long time wasn't taking any Falcons players. And then after really a disastrous day 1 where they can say whatever they want about Michael Penix, and I actually feel bad for Michael Penix at this point because this is just not on him. But what they do at the top of their draft, it feels a little to me like, hey guys, look, we're getting a lot of heat from the draft here. Maybe some of the locals will take it easy on us if we go out there and draft a Georgia player. In the 2022 draft, they take 2 Georgia players in the 6th round, Justin Schaefer and John Fitzpatrick, though they took Justin Schaefer ahead of Jamari Sawyer there, and I'm sure a lot of Georgia and Falcons fans weren't necessarily thrilled with that day. It's just an interesting team-building decision there by Terry Fontenot and the folks up there in Flowery Branch. We'll see how it works out, but after what they did at the top of the 1st round, this maybe feels a little bit like pandering to me with what they did with Zion Logue.
All right, UGA had 3 undrafted free agents in Kendall Milton, Dejon Edwards, and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint, who, by the way, Connor said was going to be the steal of the draft, and he didn't even get drafted. So, Connor, who are you going to go with as the undrafted free agent that is most likely to make their team?
This is easy. It's Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. I'm going right back to the well. I think this is a guy that's going to be able to help out on special teams there, do a lot of different things for a Washington franchise that hasn't had a lot of luck in recent years. Again, I'm not expecting him to come in and play a huge role for there, but he's going to, similar to Karius Jackson like he did last year, make that team because of special teams, and then we'll see what ultimately he's able to develop into as a wide receiver there. I do find it particularly funny that the Eagles this year, they don't take any Georgia players after getting a lot of criticism over the course of the season because they took so many Georgia players in recent years and their defense sort of fell apart over the second half of the year. And then the second the draft ends, Howie Roseman has a deal with Kendall Milton to go up there and help out in the run game. So I'm very interested in seeing what Marcus is able to do. I would not bet against him. I trust his skill set, and I think part of the reason he didn't get drafted is because he wasn't a great tester, and again, doesn't have the statistical output to merit it. But this is a guy that'll absolutely help the Commanders at the next level.
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to agree with you here. I like the duo between Jaden Daniels and Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. Plus, running backs in the NFL just don't have a very long shelf life, and therefore it's going to make it harder for Kendall Milton and Dejon Edwards to make that roster. So I do think that the easy pick here is Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint. So I'm going to agree with you on this. Now we're going to move on to who do we think out of the drafted Dogs is going to have the longest career in the NFL? Connor, take it away.
Pick number 141, Cedric Van Pran-Granger. He goes to a great spot in Buffalo where I think he's going to have a chance to win that starting center job right away. Again, fell in the draft because of athleticism concerns, not a lot of positional value. He's pretty much only going to be, I think, a center at the next level. But this is a guy that was extremely durable in his time at college. 44 career starts, did not miss a game in any of his 3 seasons at the University of Georgia. And so that durability factor impacts that there. Obviously, Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey go to better situations, but because of the positions they play, it's just harder for me to sort of see those guys sticking around for as long as potentially a Cedric Van Pran-Granger has. Look at Jason Kelce and what he was able to do over the course of their career. I'm not in any way comparing Cedric to Jason Kelce, but you have seen at that center position, guys are able to last quite a long time. The 2014 NFL draft, who's still playing from that draft? An undrafted free agent, David Andrews, is the starting center for the New England Patriots. This is a position and a guy that I think can, because he wins with his mind so often, really have a very, very long career in the NFL.
I hope that you can gather my utter disappointment from what I'm about to say here, because it is taking me a lot to say that. I think that you were completely right in this. All of my notes, basically word for word what you just said. Cedric Van Pran, after kickers, punters, and quarterbacks, O-linemen on average have the longest shelf life of anybody in the NFL career-wise. I had it written down. David Andrews in his 9th season, a captain with the Patriots. And by the way, sorry to expose you, David Andrews, he just moved to Rome. So that just makes me like him even more than I already did. And then you have a guy like Jason Kelce who spent 13 years as a center for the NFL. So Connor is right. I agree with this pick. I think that Cedric Van Pran will have the longest NFL careers, and I'm really happy for him. And I know our boss, BJ Sweeney, is really excited to see him go to the Bills as well, especially after they gave up their pick to the Kansas City Chiefs, and I thought that Bills Mafia was going to start World War III. Good for them for getting said. All right, I like this one a lot. Where is the party at? If you were getting drafted and you had to have a draft party, where would you want your draft party to be? Connor, I'm excited to see where you go with this.
I'm renting a house in Charleston, South Carolina, great food city. We're going to draft. I'm going to go jump in a pool or a beach, probably have a beach house with a pool so I can do both things there after I get drafted, and then go eat a great meal and then get on the plane the next day and go ahead and get starting to work. So we're getting drafted in Charleston, South Carolina, even though born and raised in Roswell, Georgia.
If you would have asked me this question a week ago, my answer would have been totally different. But in light of recent events, if I was going to be drafted, I would like to have my draft party at Perfect Day Coco K. And no, this is not a sponsor plug. This is my opinion because I had the best time in Coco K. That infinity pool that overlooks the ocean. I mean, I've got a big family, right? Like that pool could fit my entire family and friends and fellow DawgNation employees that I would want to be there. We could make it a whole week-long excursion, take a Royal Caribbean cruise to the island for my draft party. And plus, I mean, just imagine the viral moments when me getting drafted is in the middle of an island in an infinity pool, I mean, that really sets the standard high. And I don't think that anybody in the years to come could compete with that. And it's different. So shout out to Perfect Day Coco Cave, because that's exactly where I'd want my draft party to be.
I have a question. So is Coco Cay, is it like domed? Is like the sun covered? Because you're looking kind of ghostly. And like, did you just not get any sun while you were there? Or was it just indoors? Like, what happened there?
So you're looking at this the entire wrong way, right? I'm somebody who gets so sunburnt, like almost as red as you, like when you blush on the show every 2 seconds. Like, that's what I look like when I'm out in the sun for too long. And so you're looking at this the wrong way. It's the fact that I didn't come back sunburnt shows that I really won this entire experience. And I would like to share just one story from the cruise real quick while we're on this topic. So I spent some time with Brandon Adams on Coco Cay, and he told me that I needed to put on some sunscreen. I was like, well, I already have it. I can reapply. And he's like, okay, I've got some for you. Tell me why it's 100 SPF. And he thinks this is so serious. I'm like, Brandon, 100 SPF does not exist. I'm sorry to have to be the one to break it to you, but like, it doesn't get higher than 50 SPF. So he must have got it on clearance, or maybe I'm the one that just didn't know because I didn't come back sunburnt. So not being tan, sunburnt, I consider it a win, even if you don't. Connor.
I mean, you can be tan and not sunburned.
I physically cannot tan. Like, it is just not. If you ever see me tan on the show, I don't care. I'll expose myself. I bought it, okay? I didn't get it naturally, because if I burn, it peels off. Like, I mean, scales. So and plus two, being in the sun is fine, because when I'm 40 and look 30 and all the other girls my age are 40 and look 50, I'm going to say it's because you spent all that time in the tanning bed and all that time laying out in the sun. So I'm playing the long run here. Everybody else is playing checkers, and I'm playing chess. Boom. Mic drop. No, I won. I don't care what you say. I didn't come back sunburnt, and my parents could not have been more proud of me. And before we wrap up on our quick hits, I think we need to have a little accountability check, and there was no better person to do that than Cody Chafins.
I got to get in the middle of you two because, it's getting a little harsh there with the suntan talk. So we'll keep you guys in your corners for a minute. We got a few things I got to kind of cover here. First, it's good. You guys were both correct at the Falcons last week's show. We got to clean up some things. Both of you said the Falcons would draft somebody from Georgia. Both were right, although didn't imagine it would be the 6th round again. Yeah. We do have a challenge flag, as you mentioned, Kaylee, last week. Connor said the steal of the draft, Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, wasn't drafted, but okay, we still hope for the best, as he is an undrafted free agent now. And we do have a penalty to call. This segment's called Quick Hits. There wasn't nothing quick about this segment. Let's pick it up, people.
In all fairness, I did say at the beginning, it is called Quick Hits, but I don't imagine that it's going to be quick. So I did warn people. Maybe we just need to add some more in there next time, and we'll keep the pace moving a little bit better.
Or we just not tell sunscreen stories.
Okay, well, when you're the one that comes after me, if there's one thing I'm always going to do, it is stand on business, and that's what I just did. So silence.
But you're sitting down.
What?
You're sitting down. You said you were standing on business, but you're sitting down.
I'm attached to a cord. I physically cannot stand up, okay? But I stand on business. All right. So if you enjoy what Connor and I do here on DawgNation at Large, you can do us a favor and give us a subscribe on YouTube, or if you hate what we do, you can also give us a thumbs down and give us some feedback. We're always here to take that, but we're doing a little contest here at DawgNation to see who can pull the most subscribers, and the winner gets a pizza party. Connor and I both love pizza, so if you like our show and you like what we do, make sure to subscribe to us on our YouTube channel. That way you can get
don't hit that thumbs down. Like, just thumbs up and subscribe. We don't even need to give them that option. Thumbs up and subscribe.
Well, I mean, even if they give us a thumbs down, it still means that they're watching our show. So no. It's everybody isn't entitled to an opinion. I'm not saying that the people that give a thumbs down that it's right, but
subscribe,
it just goes
and thumbs
to show.
Up only. Good vibes only here.
Connor says subscribes and thumbs up only, or good vibes only. All right. Either way, we appreciate all of you guys watching us, and if you enjoy watching us, subscribe to us on YouTube. You can get all of our updates and watch more of our DawgNation at Large shows. So now we are going to transition into our bold predictions featuring some very special guests from our DawgNation cruise. Let's hear them now.
My name is Carl Alderman. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. My bold prediction for this year is that Carson Beck will break the all-time single-season passing record.
My name is Donnell Lancaster. I'm from Mableton, Georgia, and my bold prediction is that we are going to beat Texas in the Orange Bowl in the semifinal game to go to the finals.
Georgia Bulldogs go one loss, which will be 14-1 in the national championship, period.
Hey, I'm Van West from Charlottesville, Virginia. My bold prediction, ETN and Robinson will combine for over 3,000 total yards this year.
Hi, my name is Karen LaFlamme from Woodstock, Georgia, and my bold prediction is that we are going to score 5 non-offense touchdowns.
Hello, my name is Shane Lancaster. I'm from Marietta, Georgia, and my bowl prediction is that ice cream goes best in a bowl.
ETN this year against Varda has 150 rushing yards, 7 receptions for 85 yards.
This is Dina Pruitt, a triple dog from Winder, Georgia. My bold prediction is that we will have a punt return and a kickoff return for touchdowns in the same game.
I'm Michelle. I'm from Fitzgerald, Georgia, and my bold prediction is that we'll have 2 1,000-yard rushers this year, Etienne and Robinson.
Hi, I'm Anthony Fanchi. I'm from Northeast Georgia, and I got a bold prediction for you. We know that Carson Beck is expected to be a great quarterback this year. He is going to have a stellar year. He is going to break some SEC records. He's going to get nominated for the Heisman Trophy. So he's going to get ready for his trip to New York. But then for some inexplicable reason, he's going to take a Carnival cruise right before the ceremony, and he's going to get COVID and he can't go.
First off, shout out to every single person on the cruise that participated in our bold predictions video. Ice cream does go better in a bowl. Loved that.
That's
one.
just wrong. I'm
Yes.
sorry. I
No.
can't sit here and abide by that. Have you ever had it in an ice cream cone? That's incredible.
If you're,
That's wrong.
then it's not about the ice cream itself. Then it becomes about the cone. Good ice cream doesn't need anything else to go with it other than a cold bowl. So I loved that. I agree with his bold prediction, but I have to say my favorite one is the last one, just because of the creativity that went into that about Carson Beck getting COVID and missing the Heisman Trophy ceremony. See, that's the exact reaction that I wanted from bold predictions. I told them I want to be absolutely disgusted and shocked by what you guys come up with, because Carson Beck winning the Heisman is not a bold prediction. Carson Beck missing the Heisman Trophy ceremony because he gets COVID, that's bold, and that's exactly what I wanted to accomplish with this video.
I can't tell which I dislike more. Ice cream is best in a bowl, just an insane take to have. I guess you're
Bold.
a slacky eater. Or Carson Beck getting COVID in December of 2024, knock on wood. There's a world where Carson has a playoff game, and if I'm having to write about him getting COVID and his availability for that, Anthony, I'm coming after you, because I do not want to enjoy that and have to be in that news cycle.
You should just go ahead and get the pre-write ready just in case, because we've heard it here first. All right, Connor, I will let you give your first bold prediction. Now, keep in mind, even though we're not keeping score here, I did not make Connor submit his bold predictions to me. That way I could be surprised by what he had to say. So, Connor, if you would like to give me your first bold prediction, I will hear you out.
Yeah, first bold prediction, Alabama is not going to make the playoff, and Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss are. I think that there are a couple of teams, competing for that sort of third or fourth spot in the SEC. I think Georgia and Texas are the two best bets to make the college football playoff, but beyond them, I think Missouri is going to ultimately end up making it. And then you've got LSU, Alabama, and Ole Miss, I think, competing for that fourth spot. I think Alabama's going to miss out this year. A lot of turnover there. New first-year head coach, Kalen DeBoer. And I think Lane Kiffin has gone all in for this season. They've got a very easy schedule to navigate. And I think they're going to find themselves in the college football playoff this year. So no Alabama, and Lane Kiffin, first year Nick Saban, is not in the SEC West, or I guess it's not the SEC West anymore, makes it to the college football playoff for the first time.
Do I like this prediction? Sure. I see the realness in it. This could happen. But is it bold? Is it spicy? I just don't know if it gave me enough, Connor. I think I was expecting a little bit more from your first one.
Okay, I'm waiting on yours.
All right, let's go. My first bold prediction is I think that mid-season Tennessee will have a Connor Stallions like scandal, because if there's anything that I've learned from watching years and years of reality television, it is that scandal tends to breed scandal. And what SEC team has had more scandal in the last decade than the Tennessee Vols? And this is what I think it all goes back to. I'm not saying that their scandal is going to be similar to what Connor Stallions did, but I think it's going to be one that rocks the college football world like the one did last year with Michigan. And this is why I think it's going to happen. Tennessee was at their peak when they had Hendon Hooker, when Georgia played them as the number one team. That has the best that Tennessee has been in a long time. But since then, the program has continued to decline. This year, with no SEC East and no SEC West, there's more pressure on Tennessee to perform well more than ever, because typically in the SEC East, Tennessee fell in that second, third spot, but with there being no divisions, Tennessee doesn't want to be a team that gets lost in the mix. And I do think that the pressure is on them to perform well. And I think that Tennessee's probably done some shady and sketchy stuff to get their program to where they feel like it needs to be, because we all know that Tennessee fans are, well, they're nuts, quite frankly. And so I think that Tennessee is willing to go to extreme measures to get their program back to where they think it needs to be. So therefore, my first bold prediction is that mid-season this year, Tennessee will go through an absolutely massive scandal boom.
Okay, so your bold prediction is that Tennessee, a program that has had numerous NCAA violations over the years, gets caught.
Well, I think that this one is going to be more massive than the rest. It's also very specific. So I'm fairly confident in this that it might even be bigger than what the Connor Stallion scandal.
Right, because the Connor Stallion scandal had such a drastic impact on Michigan. They went 15-0 and still made the college football playoff. That was just, it absolutely rocked the Michigan fan base and program to its core.
Well, if you think mine isn't spicy, then let's just go ahead and hear your next one.
Up next, I believe, is this the Colorado one? Yeah, Colorado not going to make it to a bowl game.
Just like they didn't do last year?
Right, yeah. But again, I think there's a lot of hype around Deion Sanders in this program. They've got 2 potential first-round picks in Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. There's a lot of chatter out there surrounding Deion and what he's looking for. They're moving to a new conference, the bloated Big 12, or however many actual teams are in there. And I just don't see it with this program. Look, they're turning over the roster a whole lot. I think that this is, a program where their expectation, you certainly think early part of last season, they're making strides there. I just don't know if they're going to be able to make those same strides and get to where they necessarily want to, or certainly envision Deion getting to in year 2 with this program. I haven't seen the stability and sustainability needed from this program to make me think that they're going to make another leap forward. And I actually think that while they improved in year 1 from a 1-win win to a 4-win team, I don't think we're going to see them improve in year 2.
All right. I wouldn't call this a bold prediction because they didn't make a bowl game last year, but I will say this about Colorado, just personal thoughts. At the beginning of the season, in year 1 with Deion Sanders, I think that Colorado, kind of was America's team doesn't feel like the right term, but there were so many eyes on Colorado, and I think a lot of people were rooting for them. And I think that narrative has shifted from them being the hero to them being the villain because of how Deion Sanders has gone about the windows for the transfer portal and how open the transfer portal guys have been about Deion telling them to leave. And then on top of that, you have Shedeur Sanders, who isn't scared to make comments on social media about what's going on. I saw something yesterday about a Colorado player saying that Deion told him that he needed to leave, and he was very open about it. And then one of the players, I believe it was Shedeur, but somebody can fact check me on that, was like, well, I don't remember him, so he must have been mid at best. I think there's a serious attitude problem at Colorado, and I think that it's ultimately going to continue to be their downfall. So that's what I'll say about the Colorado program. I will go next with my bold prediction. Now, this is probably my least bold out of all the predictions. Still probably more bold than both of yours that we've seen so far. I think that this year, for the first time since 2017, a running back will finally once again be a Heisman finalist. Now, this is why this can be considered bold, right? Out of the 10 preseason favorites for the Heisman Trophy odds this year, not one single one of them is a running back. Obviously, the top contenders being Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, Nico from Tennessee. But I think that this is going to be the first year since 2017 that potentially a running back could see New York again, specifically the two from Ohio State and Trayvon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. I think that one of them can ultimately be the one that sits with the final three in New York this year. Therefore, my bold prediction being a running back will finally, yet again, be a Heisman finalist.
I mean, look, this award is what it is, but to call that a bold prediction when we've had running backs win in the past decade, I don't necessarily know if I would go out on a limb and say this is if you're saying he's going to win a Heisman Trophy, sure. But if anything, don't you think that Trayvon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins would eat into their own candidacies because they are competing for the same number of snaps in the backfield? I think if there's going to be a running back that's going to be a Heisman finalist, I think it'd be someone like Ollie Gordon, who's going to get the workload for Oklahoma State.
Yeah,
and
I think
has
that's a good one too.
Already built-in production there as well.
Well, quite frankly, there is a difference between being bold and being an idiot. And if I was going to say that a running back was going to win the Heisman, I think that would put me in the idiot category versus this is my bold category, and you can take it for what it is. All right, Connor, give me your last bold prediction.
Yeah, when Georgia and Florida meet in the cocktail party, Billy Napier will not be standing on the opposing sidelines. I know there's a lot of chatter around Billy Napier, and if you look at their schedule, so much of it has been talked about how they end the regular season there. I think they got Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State in their final 5 games of the season. But they got a couple of toughies at the beginning of the year as well. They got Miami, they got UCF to open up the season. I know they got Texas A&M and Kentucky mixed in there as well. And those aren't easy games. And Florida had one player taken in this year's NFL draft, and that was Ricky Pearsall, a transfer player there. So it's year 3 for Billy Napier. This recruiting class kind of fell apart there at the end of the 2024 cycle. And it's just a tough road to hoe. There's a lot of negativity around that fan base. And if they get off to say like a 3-4 start or a 2-5 start going into the bye, I would not be surprised if they decide to make the move going into the bye rather than waiting it out after the fact, because I think, you can at least maybe recuperate some positive momentum coming out of the bye, even with as difficult as a schedule as they have at the end.
You know what? I like this. I actually like this pick, and I could see this happening because, as you mentioned, the bye week usually comes right before Georgia, Florida, which is obviously a time to regroup your program and get them where they need to be. So I like this pick, but I know who would love this pick. Number 1, our good friend Eddie, and number 2, Brandon Adams would also support this pick. So I like this, and I actually, not to dog on myself here, but I think out of all the predictions that we've given this far, I think, well, aside from your first one, which almost was like a given, this one's actually pretty realistic, and I could see this happening. But honestly, I kind of wish that we could watch Kirby Smart smack down on Billy Napier just one more time.
See, they're not going to do that. Kirby has a real respect for Billy Napier, and I actually think if there's an interim coach there or someone that he doesn't have a relationship with, I think that would actually encourage more bloodbath in Jacksonville that season.
Well, that's sad because it's Georgia, Florida, and we're not here to make friends. We're here to play the game of football. All right, I'm going to give you my last one. Some people might not like this.
Wow, you're a hater.
No,
wow.
Hear me out.
Wow.
I'm going to get so specific here, right?
Wow.
I know. See? Bold. Love that reaction.
That's not bold. That's being a hater.
No, this is what I think is going to happen. Well, okay. UGA is going to go to Austin, Texas. They are going to lose to Texas 30-27 in overtime. It's going to go to overtime, right? But then UGA is going to defeat them in the semifinals of the college football playoff. And then UGA is going to go win the national championship. I just think that there has to be a learning point in the season for UGA. There's got to be something that happens that makes this team come together and really recognize their identity. And I think that Texas is the perfect game to do so, because it would still, even with one loss, they're going to be in the college football playoff regardless. I think that this team's going to have a come-to-Jesus moment to be a true national championship title contender, and I think that comes at Texas this year.
Hater Mansell. Unbelievable. I mean, people who went on the DawgNation cruise know what my bold prediction is for that Georgia-Texas game. It is that Georgia is going to have a larger margin of victory against Texas than Max Verstappen is going to have at Sunday's F1 race there in the U.S. Grand Prix. Look, I just don't see it with this Texas team. They lost a lot of talent on their defensive line. They're going out and getting Bill Norton from Arizona to transfer into the program and provide depth there on the defensive line. They got a lot of new pieces at wide receiver. Quinn Ewers, we'll see what happens from him as he continues to develop there. But I think Kirby knows that he can go into Texas and make a statement that day. Not all that dissimilarly from when Kirby and hosted Tennessee in 2022, though obviously that game was in Athens, whereas that game will be in Austin. I think this Georgia team is going to be primed and ready to go against Texas and know that they can go out there and make an absolute statement. And I think they're going to go out there and actually do it. I think if there's a game that they might get tripped up by, it's maybe that Ole Miss game at the end of the season, because it does come the week after Florida there. It's maybe the Alabama game because of the bad juju there. But I think Georgia's going to go undefeated in the regular season, and I think they're going to beat Texas pretty convincingly when they meet in Austin.
Well, you and I have both made our closing arguments for bold predictions, but it is time to bring in someone who is a good judge of character and a good judge on this show. Cody Chaffins, come in and evaluate our bold predictions.
I really do enjoy listening to your bold predictions, and like you said, Kaylee, there is a thin line between being bold and being an idiot, and watching you two walk that line is oh so fun. We look at the spicier takes. I'm going to have to say the spicier, maybe more bold takes, probably Kaylee's, and very specific, very Anthony from the Cruise-like specific with the overtime call in Austin, Texas, and then they're going to come back and beat them, and specifically in the semifinal. So very bold there. I think Connor has shown a little love for Lane Kiffin today, saying, A, they're going to make the playoffs, and B, they might be the team to beat Georgia in the regular season. Very interesting there. But I think Connor's are probably more possible. I think Kaylee's are a little more spicy, if you will.
We had two different interpretations of what this was, and that is okay, because that is the beauty of this show, is that we get to put our thoughts out there. And I hope that people, DawgNation, if you're watching, we would love for you to put your bold predictions in the comments, and maybe we can revisit some of those next week. And please don't hate on me for saying that UJ is going to lose to Texas when Connor is very open about how Herschel Walker is not the best player in UGA football history. Just keep that in mind when you watch this and you decide that you want to rush to the comments to say something. Just keep in mind that Connor has said much worse.
One, to quote the great Conan O'Brien, I am fine. I am perfectly fine. Two, again, I think Georgia's going undefeated in the regular season this year. I think they're winning out. I think they're beating Texas. And you got Hader Mansell there just, thinking they're going to lose on the road at Texas. Choose to support who you want there. But some of us live in reality. Others, want to wish upon it. And so.
Heavy is the head that wears the crown, and I will wear Hader Mansell proudly today. Thanks for the help, Eddie. All right, well, this has been another episode of DawgNation at Large, and I have to say, this is probably one of my favorites that we've done so far. Good camaraderie. Connor, as always, thank you for being my co-host, and it wouldn't be DawgNation at Large if we didn't thank our fabulous referee, judge, a man that wears many hats. That's Cody Chaffins. And of course, none of it would be possible without you, DawgNation. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock.